Hi, and welcome back to Act on Mental Health. If you're new to this channel, my name is Sean Hardy, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor based here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. On this channel, I help people learn acceptance and commitment therapy, or as it's known as ACT. So whether you're a client, a graduate student, wondering if ACT's right for you, or if you're a therapist like me and you want to use this in practice, these videos are meant to encourage you to learn ACT and utilize it in your own life as well as in practice. Now today I have the whiteboard with me, and as I move from session to session, I tend to utilize the whiteboard quite a bit. And so I'm going to go ahead and transition to that over this next couple videos so you can see what I do in therapy. Now, if you're following along, we've been in the ACT roadmap, which is a 10-session protocol that I've created that's fits for a generic type of client. I tend to bounce around these, but this is something that you can use from 1 to 10, and it has 3 parts. Talked about phase 1 of learning how to be open to our experiences using acceptance and cognitive diffusion processes. And now we're in the phase 2 of aware. So aware of what? Well, this is contact with the present moment, learning to be here and now. And in this video, we're going to talk about self as context, the who's observing our experiences. And then in the next few videos, we'll be talking about the phase 3, which is the engage phase, which is where you spend a lot of the therapy once you set the groundwork for ACT. So you don't need to know it all. This is really to help you just get a little bit further in your understanding of ACT. So today I'm going to introduce self as context using a couple metaphors and experiential exercises that I tend to use in session. So let's talk first, what is self as context? How does ACT understand the self, or who I am, and how we experience life? So our thoughts, memories, feelings, sensations, what role do they have? Now, to better understand self as context, we actually need to understand the 3 modes of the self that ACT uses as a framework. Now, usually in sessions, I don't go through all of these. Sometimes I'll maybe briefly describe them, or maybe if the client is especially interested in how ACT works, or maybe they have some questions about self as context, I might go a little deeper and explain these. But for this video, since you're going to be utilizing ACT and explaining self as context, I think it's good to better understand these modes so you can better navigate in a session. So I'm going to write these down on the whiteboard. The first mode is something called self as content. All right, so self as content. Now, self as content would be like understanding the self as a cup. So let's say there's some water, maybe some ice cubes in here, and that is the self. All right, so when we describe the self from an ACT framework, what we're describing is there is this self as a container. And then there's all this internal content. So this would be thoughts, feelings, images, memories, urges, sensations, all these things that are happening within us. And when we talk about self as content, we usually think about fusion. When we're getting fused with a thought, so I am depressed, and we feel like we are, all what we're seeing is that depressed feeling. We are actually being fused with the content. So the self is being fused with the content. This would be like confusing the cup with the ice and the water that's within it. I am the ice cube. I am the water. Instead of understanding I have a cup with water in it, with ice cubes in it. So this is good to kind of help us to differentiate what is going on and what is part of the self and what is not. So we have self as content as one of the modes of the self. All right, so next one here is self as process. And what I'm going to write here is a didactic framing, which is a fancy way of describing two ends that are communicating. Now I'll explain this here. Self as process is the you that has been consistent throughout all time. It's the you that is watching this video. There has been a consistent, stable perspective, like a tripod, that has been consistent throughout your life. All right. But right now, you are here. All right. So I, here, now. I, meaning Sean, this vessel, this perspective, is here in an office in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I'm now, and I think today is February 16th at 12:40 p.m. All right, so this is my perspective. This is where my tripod currently is as self as process. This is where we use it for the present moment and to contact the present moment, but it also helps us to communicate with other things. So for example, if you're having a lot of ruminating, depressed thinking, you are in a different frame. If you are having a lot of worry, maybe that anxiousness, anxiety about something that's coming up, you are in a different frame. And this is what ACT calls the you, there, then frame. So this is a different self. This is a self that is not in the here and now, but it's a self that's either in the conceptualized past or the conceptualized future. ACT, and this is probably too much information for you, but ACT views the self, at least the past, as conceptualized. And I think it's pretty accurate. We don't have perfect memory like we think we do. We don't have like a recording of memory that just plays so that we can access it. It's always conceptualized. And that leaves room to have things a little murky, not as clear. So we have to realize that the only thing that's clear is right now. It's the I here now, self as process. And the things that are in the past or things that are in the future, it's conceptualized. It's something that is at a different place. All right. And this helps us to stay present. All right. Does that make sense? And also to understand when we go to the past that we're visiting, we're not able to actually go there. All right. I hope that makes sense. These things I tend to geek out on and really love reading about it in ACT. And I've come to understand them as I go. But this can be really important to help people stay here and now, understand, their limitations of going to the past and future. So we have two so far. The third is the one that this video is helping you with. And this is where in the session 4 is where we're going to help the client to better understand the context in which they exist. Okay. Sometimes I'll throw in one-liners that I know will confuse the client, but it'll help bring some intrigue. So I'll say things like, you have room for this. You are always bigger than what's happening with right now. And sometimes they'll just kind of let it slide. But after a few times of saying that, I'll have a client that will, catch me on that and ask, what do you mean by that? You say that quite a bit. And this is how I explain it when I get to this session. I usually use two metaphors to share this self as context. The first is the sky as weather. All right, so the sky as weather goes like this. The sky is like the self. It is expansive. It is a context that happens. And then the weather is like the content that shows up. No matter the storms that show up, no matter the day that we're having weather-wise, it is temporal. It is something that is here now and then leaves. It also is never bigger than the sky. When you think about hurricanes, you think about large storm fronts, no matter how loud the thunder is, no matter how frightening the lightning is, the sky always has room for whatever shows up. And the self is similar. The self is a context. And no matter what content shows up, and no matter what we're experiencing right now, we are always, as a self, big enough. The second metaphor that I use is something called the chessboard metaphor. So you might want to ask the client, Have you ever played the game of chess? Or do you know about the game of chess? If they answered no, then I would switch it to something that they do know of. Have you ever seen a game of soccer or watched a game of football? Most will say yes to one of those. So then you just kind of switch out the pieces of this metaphor. But the chess metaphor goes like this. Imagine that you're watching a game of chess. You notice that there's a white side and a black side. And as you're watching, each side is making their moves. There's sometimes the white side makes a good move and takes out a piece on the black side. And sometimes the black side makes a good move and takes out a piece on the white side. This goes on until the game ends with the most important piece, the king, going down. Once the game ends, they reset the board and they play again. And this goes on and on and on. This is similar to our internal experiences. The white side is our positive thoughts, our positive feelings, the side we want to win. And the black side is the side of us that is negative, or the side of us that has these feelings that we don't want. And it's like this constant battle that we're watching within us of positive and negative. If we step back, though, what we realize is that this is always going to be the case. We're going to have things we want and things we don't want. But as we step back, we understand that the chessboard itself always stays there. It's never changed, no matter which side wins, no matter what move takes place. It's always there. It always has room for whatever happens on it. The self is like that. We are the context in which our internal experiences are happening. And we are unchanged by whatever shows up, whatever thought, feeling, memory, or image or urge, or sensation. We are unchanged. We always stay the same. These two metaphors are really helpful in helping a client to understand that there is a observer of their experience. There is something that is outside of whatever is happening right now that they can contact. This is going to be important for the next session that we'll go to, which is where we start to understand the behavior that they're doing and the moves that they're making, whether it's toward the life that they want or if it's away from the life that they want. This is also important to understanding the concept of values, this important life direction that we want to go in, and the place of thoughts and feelings, both the negative and the positive. We start to understand it's not necessarily about good versus bad, but it's understanding what is workable, what is helping me to move towards the life that I want. So we do that through a session that where I go through the ACT matrix. So that's going to be the topic of the next video in session 5. So if you haven't downloaded the ACT roadmap yet, I suggest you go to my website, seanhardy.com. It's a free download, and I think it's a good companion resource to these videos, and hopefully it will help you, whether you're a client utilizing this for yourself to better understand ACT and how it applies to your mental health struggles, or if you're a therapist or graduate student who's going to be utilizing this in sessions. The ACT roadmap will hopefully be helpful to you. Feel free to leave a comment below and let me know how you're doing with this journey and anything that you think would add to the conversation. I'll see you in the next video. And remember, your journey towards a more purposeful and mindful life begins with a single click.